Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome. So let's start with a few minutes of sitting quietly and settling our minds and getting into a good state of mind for our class. So let your body settle down in a comfortable position. Let your mind settle down. Put aside other thoughts that aren't related to what we are doing here for the next hour. And then bring into your mind positive thoughts, altruistic thoughts, wishes, intentions. Try to really feel the wish to learn something in this class that you can use in your life to be helpful not only to yourself, but also to other people and to the world as much as possible. Okay, so today we will continue looking at the perfections. These are practices done by bodhisattvas or those aspiring to be bodhisattvas in order to create the causes to become fully enlightened Buddhas for the benefit of all living beings. So as we read about and hear about these practices that are done by bodhisattvas, for example, last time we looked at the perfection of giving or generosity, we might sometimes feel that it's hard to believe that human beings could actually practice like that, like even giving their body, giving everything they own, even a king giving away his kingdom and so on. But keep in mind that bodhisattvas spend a long time, many lifetimes, generating love and compassion and altruism, wishing to help others. And so these attitudes, these states of mind are very powerful in them. And they also work on overcoming self-centeredness and all the afflictions like attachment and so on. And so they're very familiar. Their minds are very, very familiar with these positive qualities. And they have really subdued the afflictions, selfishness, attachment, and so forth. And so eventually they get to the point where it's not difficult for them to do such things. And they even do them with joy. They have joy in doing those things. So if we haven't spent that much time cultivating those positive states of mind, making ourselves familiar with them, then it seems difficult and maybe impossible But if we were to also spend more time working on our minds and cultivating those positive qualities, then we would also get to the point where they arise naturally and easily, and that we would be able to do the kind of things that they do. So at this point in time, we can just have the aspiration. One day, I would like to be like that. I would like to practice like that. I try not to feel discouraged or like, oh, it's impossible. So today we'll move on to the second perfection, which is ethics. So I hope you have the slides that I made containing some of the information. So first is, what is ethics? The nature of ethics. So according to the book, it's Nangsi Rinpoche explains that it is the wish to abandon harming other sentient beings. So it's having the wish, but it isn't just wishing, it's also acting that way, trying to live one's life in the way that you don't harm other sentient beings as much as possible. But it's also important to understand that it is an attitude, a state of mind, because even though we may stop doing physical harming others with our body, with our speech, but it's very hard to stop thoughts. We can still have thoughts coming up in our mind of wanting to harm others or wanting others to experience suffering. So it's harder to stop those kind of thoughts. So it's said that a bodhisattva works on even overcoming the thought, the wish to harm others, and instead replaces that with the wish to not harm others and the wish to benefit others as much as possible. So that's the general meaning of ethics. And then the perfection of ethics, that means when ethics is practiced with the motivation of bodhicitta. You're not just refraining from harming others because you understand that they don't want to suffer. I mean, that already is a very good thing. But when a bodhisattva is practicing ethics, they're not thinking only in that way, but they're thinking, I want to become a Buddha. I want to completely transform myself and become a Buddha, a fully enlightened being, so that I can help all living beings be free of suffering and so on. So their motivation for practicing ethics is bodhicitta. So then there's three kinds of ethics. First one is restraining from harmful or non-virtuous actions. The second is practicing virtue. And the third is benefiting others. Okay, so of those three, the first one is the main one. That's the most important one. And so this is something that already started earlier in the Lamrim, in the initial scope of the Lamrim, where we look at karma, learn all about karma, which kinds of actions are non-virtuous and harmful, like the 10 non-virtuous actions, and which actions are positive and virtuous, the 10 virtuous actions. So that's kind of like early on in one's spiritual practice, one's following of the path, is trying to refrain from those 10 non-virtuous actions, especially the 7 of body and speech, like the 3 actions of body: killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and then the 4 of speech: lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and gossip or idle talk. So by the time you're at the great scope, you should have quite a lot of experience in trying to refrain from those non-virtuous actions. But still, it's possible we might have thoughts coming up in our mind. thoughts of wanting to do them because we've done them many times before. So there's kind of strong habitual imprints in our mind, and those kind of thoughts might still come up. Until we have realized emptiness, until we've gained the direct realization of emptiness, then we still have in our mind afflictions like anger and attachment and so on, and ignorance. So those afflictions are still there in the mind. They haven't been eliminated. And we've had so many lifetimes of being familiar with the afflictions that they can still come up in our mind. And also we have karma, karmic seeds from our past life. So in past lives, we have done all those actions, killing and stealing and so on, many times. And so because of habituation, having done those actions before, it's still possible that the thought, the impulse might arise to do those actions again. So until one has gained the direct realization of emptiness, which is the antidote, the medicine that will clear away the afflictions and karma and so on, then it's still possible for impulses, thoughts to arise in the mind to do those non-virtuous actions. So bodhisattva, especially on the first two paths, the path of accumulation and the path of preparation, that's prior to having the direct realization of emptiness, they still have to watch out. They still have to be careful and practice mindfulness and introspective awareness, and really watch their mind and watch out for that possibility of negative thoughts coming up and the impulse to do negative actions. And Yangtze Rinpoche says in the book that we need to continuously remember the benefits of ethics and the shortcomings of not having good ethical conduct, in order to keep this strong determination that this is something we need to practice. So I'm not going to go through those again. I did go through them earlier when we went through the middle scope, the benefits of ethics, the shortcomings of not having good ethics. So it's good to keep those in mind. And also in the book, Yangtze Rinpoche, at this point, talking about restraining from non-virtuous actions, he mentions two types of negative actions. And I don't know if you've heard anyone explain this before, but it mainly comes up in the context of monastic vows. Those of us who take precepts, monastic precepts, there's actions that are not naturally non-virtuous. Just by their nature, they are non-virtuous. For example, killing and stealing. So anybody who kills or steals creates negative karma. Those actions are just by nature non-virtuous. But then there's another kind of non-virtuous action that is not naturally non-virtuous, but it becomes non-virtuous for those who have taken vows, like monastic vows, or even the lay vows, the 5 lay precepts. So an example of that is drinking alcohol or taking drugs. These are not by nature non-virtuous, because lots of people drink a little bit of wine and they don't get intoxicated and lose control and do harmful things. So it's even has health benefits. So it's not naturally non-virtuous to drink alcohol. But for monastics who've taken the vows created by the Buddha, it is non-virtuous because it's one of the vows that we take. So the Buddha said, because there was some incident of a monk who did drink alcohol and then lost control and did some shameful things. And so the Buddha said, okay, monks and nuns, we cannot drink alcohol. That's prohibited. So it's one of our vows. So because it was declared to be non-virtuous by the Buddha for those of us who take vows, then it becomes negative not naturally, but because of being prohibited by the Buddha. So when we study ethics, in especially those of us who are monastics, we have to be aware of those two kinds of negative actions or non-virtuous actions: those that are naturally non-virtuous, and those that are not naturally non-virtuous, but are non-virtuous because they were prohibited by the Buddha, for those of us um, who've taken vows. I hope that makes sense. May not be so relevant to you unless you've taken any of the 5 lay precepts, because among the 5 lay precepts, 4 of them are naturally non-virtuous. But one of them, alcohol, drinking alcohol, isn't naturally non-virtuous. But if you've taken that precept, then that does become something non-virtuous if you do it. Okay, the second type of ethics is practicing virtue. So that's like the opposite to number one. Number one is avoiding non-virtue, and then number 2 is doing virtue. So actually, when we're practicing number 1, restraining from non-virtue, we are also practicing number 2. Anytime we restrain ourselves, avoid doing things that are non-virtuous, that are negative, we are automatically creating virtue, practicing virtue, creating good karma. So you might remember when going through the teachings on karma, there's the list of the 10 non-virtuous actions, and then there's the list of the 10 virtuous actions. And the 10 virtuous actions just involve refraining, consciously, deliberately refraining from the non-virtuous actions. So when we deliberately avoid killing, we really make a conscious effort to not kill other living beings, even insects, as much as possible, then we are creating the virtuous action of not killing. And the same with stealing. If we make a conscious effort, deliberate effort to not steal, even when we could, and other people are, but we say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's wrong. Then we are creating the virtue of non-stealing, and so on, going through those 10. So that's one way of practicing virtue. But there's other ways of practicing virtue as well, such as the 6 perfections: giving and ethics, of course, patience. So practicing those is creating virtue. Also meditating on loving kindness, compassion, and helping others as much as we can, in real life, and learning the teachings, spiritual teachings, meditating on them, reciting prayers, mantras. So lots of virtuous actions fit into number 2. So practicing virtue, creating virtue, creating. We need that positive energy. The way I like to think of it is, this is just my own analogy I made up myself, but it's like having this human life, having this human body is a bit like having a car. So with a car, you can go places and do things, but you need fuel. If you don't have any fuel in your car, any gas, it won't be able to go anywhere. So I think of merit or positive energy as like fuel that enables us to travel on the spiritual path. We have this human body, this human life. We can make progress on the spiritual path, go places, get to places such as higher states of mind. But to be able to travel to those places, we need positive energy or merit, virtue. So that's my way of thinking of it and the role that it plays in our spiritual path. So Bodhisattva definitely needs virtue, merit, positive energy to travel the path to enlightenment. And then number 3, the third type of ethics, is benefiting others. So that includes actions we do to help others. And it does include refraining from the 10 non-virtuous actions, because refraining from killing and stealing and so forth does benefit others indirectly because we're not harming them. We could harm them. We have the potential to give harm to them. But when we deliberately decide, no, I'm not going to do harmful things to others, that is a way of benefiting them. But there's other things we can do as well. If they're sick, if they're hungry, if they are poor, if they're frightened, mentally, unhappy, suffering, and so on. Anything we do that benefits others fits into the third one. So there's some overlap between these three. They're not like fixed categories, but when we're doing one of these three, we're probably doing the other two as well. Then the next bullet point under that says we need to practice ethics with the right motivation. In the case of the Bodhisattva path, the right motivation is bodhicitta. We genuinely want to help others. And we should be careful not to have improper attitudes or motivations, such as pride. It's possible that one may have a sense of pride. I am so pure. Look at how pure I am. And looking down on other people who are not so pure. Okay, so we have to be careful about that kind of attitude, pride or arrogance, conceit, and also wishing for respect. That's one of the 8 worldly dharmas, wanting people to notice how good we are and to respect us, to praise us, and so on. So it may happen that people do respect us and praise us, but that should not be our motivation, our reason for practicing ethics. It should be unselfish, really for the benefit of others and for the purpose of becoming enlightened to help others. And also he talks, the last bullet point says, try to practice to the best of your ability and aspire to do better in the future. So he says, the way the bodhisattvas practice ethics is pretty high level. We may not be able to practice like that now, but we can have admiration, respect for them, and aspire to be like them in the future. So it's good to have the attitude, I will do the best that I can. I will practice this to the best of my ability. And what I can't do now, I hope to be able to do in the future. And, a good place to start is just try to refrain from the 10 non-virtuous actions as much as possible. And if we do make a mistake, if we, do one of those actions, then there's always the possibility of purification. So we don't have to feel terrible and like it's the end of the world. So I'll just read something from Yangtze Rinpoche's book, page 372. It's a kind of summary. On the one hand, as a result of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions, we eliminate suffering and problems in this lifetime and in future lifetimes, and we ensure happiness in this and future lifetimes. So it's good to remember that by practicing ethics, even though our long-term goal is Buddhahood, enlightenment, but we'll get a lot of benefits here and now. This life will go better. We'll have fewer problems in this life. Moreover, we eliminate the result of experiencing the habit similar to the cause. So what that means is in karma, you may remember one of the results of karma, if we do, say we do a negative action, is that we're creating the cause to continue doing that action again. Once we do an action of killing or stealing, it becomes easier to do it again and again and again. It becomes a habit. And so by refraining from non-virtuous actions, we're stopping that habit of doing that negative action again and again. And then he says, on the other hand, if we engage in negative actions over and over again, we create strong propensities in our minds to develop the same bad habits in all of our future lifetimes. So we'll continue doing that action in this lifetime, and even in future lifetimes. Well, maybe from an early age, we might have that same habit. Focusing on the abandonment of the 10 non-virtuous actions eliminates these habits and brings greater and greater happiness. So those are some of the benefits of ethics. So I'm not going to spend more time talking about ethics because we did already look at it earlier in the middle scope. So now let's move on to the next perfection, the perfection of patience, a very, very important one. And I remembered the last time I was there, end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and we had the retreat, end of semester retreat. The theme of that retreat was patience. So we looked at some information about patience, did some meditations on patience. So the nature of patience, Yangtze Rinpoche didn't explain it, so I got it from another book. It's a virtuous mind that is able to remain undisturbed by harm from others, voluntarily endure any form of suffering, and remain definitely thinking about the Dharma. So that definition or explanation of patience includes the 3 types of patience, which we're going to go through one by one. So the main type of patience is learning how to refrain from getting angry and retaliating to harm when someone harms us or harms people we care about. So learning how not to get angry and act out our anger and get back at that person. That's the main one, but the others are also types of patience. And then it says, to increase patience, contemplate the benefits of patience and the disadvantages of not practicing patience. So that's really helpful because it does take effort. It may not always come naturally. We have to put effort into being more patient. So if we understand the benefits of patience and the disadvantages of not having patience, we'll be more likely to make that effort. So Yangtze Rinpoche mentions some benefits of patience from Asanga, great Indian master. So one is that by practicing patience, our anger will decrease and eventually cease, and we'll have less disturbance from outside. That's interesting. If we ourselves try to be more patient, then the people around us may also become more peaceful and will be less likely to do things that are harmful and disturbing. I think we can see that in our own experience. It's like contagious. If we can tame our anger and not act out of anger and be more patient, then that can have an influence on other people around us, help them be more patient as well and less angry. And the next benefit is we'll have fewer enemies, maybe 0 enemies, and we'll have less discrimination. So anger, which is the opposite of patience, leads us to discriminate people, those that we like, those that we don't like, those that we trust, those that we mistrust, those that we want to help, those that we want to harm. So human beings normally have those kind of discriminations. But if we tone down our anger, cool down our anger, then we'll have more equanimity towards others, less likely to choose certain people we don't like, and so on. And then another benefit is dying without regret. So when we come to the end of our life, we'll be able to look back and not have many things to feel regret about, and instead feel happy, feel good, satisfied with the way we lived our life. And then another benefit is our happiness will increase and flourish. So we'll just be a happier person with less anger, because anger is such a disturbance to our happiness and our peace of mind. So when we have less anger in our mind, then naturally we'll be happier. And also, Yangtze Rinpoche talks about harmony, how important it is to have harmony in our community and society, in our family, with our people we work with, and so on. And patience enables us to have more harmony because it helps us understand people and how not everyone thinks the same way we do, not everyone has the same attitudes we do. So it helps us to be more understanding, more accepting, more tolerant towards others, and that helps us have harmony. But he also mentions it doesn't mean being patient doesn't mean letting people walk all over us. Like, I think you have this expression in Israel about being a carpet. Nobody wants to be a carpet, and you don't have to be a carpet. That isn't the meaning of patience. Being patient doesn't mean you're a carpet and people walk all over you and do whatever they want. They said, we should stop people who do harmful things to us or anybody, but we should do it without anger in our heart. So that's the meaning of patience, is not having anger and hatred in your heart towards harm doers. And you can still do what you can to stop them doing harm, but do it with compassion, with love, with the wish to benefit them. I'm sure you understand that very well. Yeah. So there's lots of benefits that we experience if we have more patience and less anger. And we don't have patience, if we have anger, then that leads to lots of suffering, lots of problems. So I'm sure we have plenty of experiences of that. And it's important to learn the antidotes to anger, because, until we've realized emptiness, then there will still be anger in our mind, and it can arise in our mind, and we may have the impulse to act it out and do something harmful or say something harmful. So it's really important to realize that acting out anger doesn't bring any benefit. It just brings problems. So see the disadvantages of anger, know the antidotes to anger so that you can apply those antidotes when anger does arise in your mind, and you can stop yourself from acting it out. And Yangtze Rinpoche in the book gives one piece of advice on how to deal with anger when it arises in the mind. He says, see the conditions that trigger the anger as like an echo or a dream. In other words, understand that they're not as solid and real as they appear to be, but are merely labeled. In other words, emptiness of inherent existence. So if you can remember emptiness and use that can help to cool down your anger. But that may be hard to do if your understanding of emptiness isn't really strong. But another similar antidote is impermanence, to just remember the impermanent nature of things. Whatever it is that's triggering the anger is impermanent. It's not going to last forever. It's subject to change. It is changing. And there may be something you can do about it to stop it or to get away from it. So as I was reading that in the book, I was thinking of one experience that I've had recently. I've been getting a lot of obscene emails, a huge amount. And unfortunately, they go into my junk folder. But I do sometimes look at my junk folder because I non-junk emails do go in there sometimes. I want to have them. So when I look at these obscene emails in my junk folder, I get quite annoyed, angry. Who is sending me these emails? I don't want them. And apparently there's no way you can stop it. All you can do is have them put in your junk folder, and then you can delete them. But just the fact that people are sending me those emails is really annoying. But I was thinking, oh, well, actually, what are these emails? There's nothing solid. They're not solid. They're just electronic messages. They're just words that appear on my screen. And in 1 second, I can get rid of them. I can delete them. I can send them into the void. And so it's kind of pointless to get upset about them and angry about them. And when I think about how whoever is doing this, the people who are using their human life and their human intelligence to do things like that, it's really sad. It's quite tragic. A waste of human intelligence. And people could do lots of beneficial things, and instead they're doing that kind of thing. It's very sad, the kind of karma they're creating. So yeah, thinking about impermanence, thinking about karma, trying to generate compassion for people who do harmful things is much more productive than just getting angry and annoyed. So yeah, it's really important to see the harm of anger and how it doesn't bring any real benefit. Although when we do get angry about things like injustice, people doing harmful things or unjust things, getting angry about that can be an incentive to act. That's where a lot of activism comes from. But if we let ourselves remain angry, then that may cloud our minds. We won't be able to think clearly, make good decisions. We might just do stupid things, making things worse rather than better. And so if we really want to be effective in bringing about social change or political change or whatever, it's better to do that without anger. Just use the anger to give you the energy, the momentum to do things. But then again, try to overcome the anger and replace it with compassion and the wish to help, the wish to benefit rather than do anything harmful. So let's start looking at the 3 types of patience. First one is not retaliating when we are harmed, and then the other 2. So we'll look at each of these in turn. Each one has its own slide. So the next slide is looking at the first type of patience, the patience of not retaliating when harmed. And so this is in situations where someone does something harmful. It might be harmful to us or to people we care about, like our family, friends, patients, people that we have concern for. And then if someone is harming them, our usual reaction is to feel angry. And we may have thoughts of harming this person in return. And many people in the world, don't try to curb their anger, and instead they just get caught up in it and act it out. And so, yeah, they're retaliating to harm. So that's what this kind of patience is all about, is learning how not to get angry. Well, it's hard not to get angry. We might have anger coming up in our mind, but how to not act it out and give harm to harm, retaliate. So, and some cultures even have the idea that this is the right thing to do. You should take revenge if someone is harming you. And if you don't take revenge, you're weak. You're like weak and cowardly. And so often there's encouragement from society. And also even in the Bible has this saying, An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? I think that's in the Old Testament. So it's almost like we're being encouraged to take revenge for harm. But I really like what Gandhi said, a great proponent of nonviolence. He said, an eye for an eye means everyone becomes blind, which is so true. Because, if you get back at someone who's harmed you, then that person will want to get back at you. And then again, you want to get back at them. And there's no end to it. It just goes on forever until maybe both of you are dead. But then your ancestors will carry on the conflict, which is what happens. Sometimes these kind of conflicts go on for generations. And yeah, it's so sad. I don't need to tell you this. You're quite aware of this in your country. But anyway, just to see how useless it is and how it just prolongs suffering to get angry and then act out our anger and retaliate. So Yangtze Rinpoche says, it's important to realize that without patience, we will never be happy. If we don't have patience, then there'll just be ongoing suffering, no happiness. So we should try to stay calm in the face of harm. And better yet is try to have care and concern for the harm doer. And he said this also applies not just to people who may harm us, but also just people we dislike. We feel aversion, dislike for them, even if they haven't harmed us. So it's possible we might have thoughts of harming somebody we dislike, just getting them out of our way. So here are some methods to cultivate this kind of patience. First one is understand that the harm doer is out of control and controlled by conditions, for example, delusions and karma. So this comes from the Buddhist understanding of the cause of suffering, how all sentient beings who are not yet enlightened, not yet liberated, have afflictions in their mind. We also have karma, karmic imprints in the past. And these come up in our mind without any choice or control and sort of take over our mind and make us act in crazy ways. So we can think of our own experiences of this. We've done things in the past that were harmful. And so it's helpful to look at how that happens and how, our mind just gets afflicted, disturbed, crazy with afflictions, and we just act them out. And then later we feel shame and regret and, don't feel good about ourselves, but it's like we can't really control it. So if we can see that in our own experience, then it helps us to understand how that happens to other people as well. Then the second bullet point says, if we get angry and retaliate, then we're creating negative karma, and that is the cause of even more suffering in the future. So that's helpful to remember, even though we may have a strong impulse to retaliate, get back that person who has harmed us or harmed others, may feel like the right thing to do. But then if we think about karma, what kind of karma are we creating if we act out this anger and do harmful things? We're creating the karma that will bring us more suffering in the future. So if that makes sense, or you can accept karma, then it's like, well, I can't even bear the suffering that I'm experiencing right now because of what that person is doing. And if I react and get angry, I'm gonna experience more of this same kind of suffering in the future. So is that what I want? Is that wise? Is that skillful? On the other hand, if we practice patience, patience is a virtuous state of mind. And if we can remain patient, hold our anger, not act out our anger, then that's virtuous. We're creating good karma, virtuous karma, and that is the cause of happiness in the future. Both happiness within samsara, but also the attainment of the higher states of liberation and enlightenment. So it's good to think about karma. What kind of karma do we want to create? What kind of experiences do we want to have in the future? So that can really help us to stop ourselves from acting out anger. And the next point is receiving harm. So if someone is harming us, that is the result of our own karma from the past. We must have done something harmful in the past to be experiencing this harm now. And if that is acceptable, if you're able to accept that, believe that. I mean, sometimes even in this lifetime, you don't have to think about past lives, but even in this lifetime, you might remember doing something harmful to that person or to other persons. And so then it's like, oh yeah, I did that before. I behaved like that before. Now I'm getting the karmic result. My karmic boomerang is coming back and hitting me. And so that can really stop your anger. Because you realize there's a reason. I have some responsibility in what is happening to me. It's not totally wrong, totally unjustified why this harm is happening to me. So that can stop us from getting angry. And also they say in the teachings that when we do go through painful experiences like being harmed, this is a way of purifying our karma, eliminating our karma, like paying back a debt. And then you don't have that debt anymore. You're free of that debt. So for someone who believes in karma and thinks that way, then they can even feel a kind of relief. Oh, I don't have that karma anymore. I don't have to go through that anymore. It's finished. That karma is finished. So they can feel even kind of happy about that. So that's another way of thinking that can help us to cool down our anger and not just act it out. And the last point says, the person who harms us is cherished by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, who would not be pleased if we retaliate. So this is something Shantideva talks about in his 6th chapter. Actually, all of these come from Shantideva chapter 6, which is just rich. It's like a treasure chest full of very helpful advice on how to not get angry and how to have patience. So he talks about this one, about how the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they love everybody. In their eyes, in their mind, every sentient being is dear, is precious, just like a child, similar to the way parents feel towards their children. And so in the eyes of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, this person is actually precious. Everybody is precious. They don't have any discrimination. They don't like some more than others. They love every being equally. So they cherish this person. They want this person to be happy. They want this person to not suffer. That doesn't mean they condone what this person is doing, that they are blind to the misbehavior of this person. That is not the case. They definitely see very clearly that this person is deluded and out of control and doing harmful things, creating suffering for others, but also creating suffering for themselves. They're creating bad karma, and then they're going to suffer in the future. So they have super strong compassion for this person and don't want this person to suffer. And so then think about how the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would feel if you were to harm this person, if you were to act out your anger and say hurtful things or do hurtful things to this person. Are they going to be happy about that? Will they feel good? So Shantideva says, no, they will not feel happy. It's similar to if you're a parent And if your child does something naughty, maybe your child throws a rock at somebody else's house, maybe they even break a window. So that is quite naughty. But if your neighbors were to come out and start beating your child for doing that, how would you feel? I mean, of course, you're not happy about what your child did, but you also don't want your child to get beaten up by your neighbors. Okay, so you wouldn't be happy about that. So in a similar way, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would not be happy with us if we were to beat up somebody who does harmful things. That's not the appropriate response. They would want us to be patient and, of course, try to stop the person from the harm that they're doing and try to get them to stop doing that harm. But they don't want us to, act out our anger and do harmful things. So thinking in that way, I mean, that may take some time to contemplate for it to make sense to you, but that might be a useful way to curb your anger and stop yourself from just acting it out. So it worked for Shantideva. I mean, this is one of the one of the things that he used to help himself curb his anger. And you might try it out and see if it works for you as well. So these are just a few methods. There's many, 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 many other methods as well. There's whole books written about this subject of how to curb anger and not act out anger. Okay, so we're not going to have time to go through all of the material I prepared for today, but let's at least start looking at patience number 2, which is called the patience of willfully taking on suffering. So what this means is there are times when we encounter problems, difficulties, such as getting sick or being bitten by an insect or getting in a traffic jam, losing a job, having a difficult neighbor. Okay, so any kind of problem, unpleasant experience that happens in our life, our usual reaction might be to get angry or to get upset, be unhappy, maybe blame other people, or try to escape with drugs, alcohol, food, entertainment, and so on. So these are things that people often do when they're faced with some unpleasant experience in life. And many of these things don't help. They might just give a temporary relief, but they don't really solve the problem. And they might even lead to other problems. People can get addicted to alcohol and drugs, or if they eat too much, then they get overweight and have health problems and so on. And so the Buddha said, acting in those ways to get away from problems is just like shooting ourselves with another arrow. It's increasing our suffering rather than decreasing it. And so his advice is it's better to face the problem and use Dharma methods such as mindfulness, wisdom, and so forth to manage our mind and how we react to problems. So this is similar to the thought transformation teachings. So we've heard these before, meditated on these before. There's all these different methods you can use to work on your mind, work on your attitudes, your thoughts, your feelings when difficulties happen. And the idea is you can even use problems in your spiritual practice. So that's what it says in the first bullet point. Suffering isn't necessarily bad. It can be used in our spiritual practice. For example, it can help us to have more renunciation, more conviction that samsara, cyclic existence, is in the nature of suffering. It's like being in prison. It's something to be free from rather than to get stuck in. So we need that attitude of seeing the suffering nature of samsara. So we want to get out and help others get out So when we do face problems, we can use that as a reminder of the nature of samsara and help us have greater renunciation. And also other things like compassion. We can have greater empathy and greater compassion, because when we ourselves suffer, then we understand how other people feel when they suffer. So for me, that's one of the techniques I find most helpful, is just to think, I'm not the only person who's got a problem like this. Lots of other people have similar problems, and some have even worse problems than mine. That helps that the problems seem more bearable rather than unbearable. But it also opens up my heart. So there's more empathy, more compassion for others and wanting to help others. So those are just a few techniques we can use when we face difficulties. We have run out of time now, so we have to end here. But I can continue next week going through the others, and also looking at the third type of patience, which is with regard to Dharma practice. So next week I will finish talking about patience, and then we'll go on and look at the next perfection, which is enthusiastic perseverance, or joyous effort. I like to call it joyous effort, the fourth perfections. And we'll start looking at the fifth one, concentration. But that's mainly about how to develop calm abiding, which you've probably heard about numerous times. So you can, it'll be more like a review. So in the very last of the slides is the pages for next time. If you could read those, prepared for the next talk, that will be helpful. Also, just to mention, the Dalai Lama is going to be giving some teachings this week, 17 and 18 of December, on what's called the Mahasatipatthana Sutra, which is very interesting. That's, a sutra normally studied in the Theravada tradition. And actually, the teachings were requested by some Theravada monks and practitioners in Southeast Asia. So it's interesting that His Holiness is going to be talking about that, because it makes me wonder, well, I'm sure there is a Tibetan version of the Satipatthana Sutra. So I think that's what he's going to be teaching. So I'm really interested to learn about that. It's probably the middle of the night for you, but you can look on the website and find, because the teachings are always there the day after, and you can watch them later if you're interested. There'll just be 2 teachings on that. So let's finish with dedication, mental dedication of our positive energy. May this be shared by all living beings. May it bring them peace and happiness, and especially help them overcome anger, impatience, which leads to so much suffering for themselves, for others, and for the world. May it help all living beings learn patience. Okay, thank you.